Will you guys do me a favor? Can you guys move kind of towards this way? Because we're going to have a virtual audience too, so we've got to make sure that we're engaging them. And if y'all are all over here, it's going to be awkward for the virtual people. And if you don't mind making sure you're at a table with someone else, at least one other person with you.
At least two people.
That would be awesome. Y'all
Also,
are the best.
the front row's open. We don't bite. Oh. Kayla might, but I don't. Welcome, everybody. Who's from California? Where? Never been. I was just wondering if someone would have been before her. Who likes my morning voice? I gotta find coffee.
I don't have time for coffee.
3 minutes.
Thank y'all. That'll make it so much easier when they go live with the virtual.
There's coffee outside the restroom there?
Maybe we should have had that guy stay in here because I don't know if it just goes live at 8:30. We just need to start right at 8:30, or if they have to do something. You go find. Okay. The guy, he didn't tell you when he was here earlier? When you were talking to him earlier, they didn't say anything?
No, better though.
Okay. I'm going to assume it just goes live, and we should just go ahead and start. Because it's 8:30.
Good morning, everyone. If you're just coming in, could you please make sure that you're sitting at a table with at least one other person? At least one other person.
We won't make you touch each other, but you have to talk.
Ashley.
Okay, we are making sure that we have correct tech for our virtual audience, who may or may not be joining us already. So good morning. Thanks for getting up early and coming to the first session of the day on the last day of conference. We're excited to teach you guys about nurture groups. How many of you have experienced nurture groups before? So some of you, just one? Okay, awesome. They're one of my favorite things, so I'm excited. We're going to give you a little foundation, and then we'll jump into teaching you how to do them. Do a little bit of experience. When they told us we had a room that was going to be virtual, we were like, that's going to be a little harder to do a nurture group when they're not here. So
They're checking.
okay, so we may have a virtual audience that's wondering what we're doing. All right.
No, hold on.
Welcome.
We are streaming live.
Awesome. Welcome to our virtual audience. Thank you guys for joining us. We're so excited that you guys are here. This is something that is near and dear to our heart. This is something we do with our families. We have found nurture to be the secret sauce of parenting, really. It's the thing that for our kids who've experienced trauma, it is the thing that more than anything builds connection and brings relationship, which is what we are seeking with our kids.
How many of you are really good at saying no? I'm assuming the rest of you didn't hear the question. Okay, so you'll notice that it doesn't say structured care, because everybody's real good at that part of it. Everybody's got their rules. If I had to say, look, if we didn't have the virtual audience, hello everybody, then I would do a good exercise, and I'd say, write down all the rules in your home, and you'd make like a list, and then you'd flip it over, and you'd keep writing. Right? But we're really, really great at that part of it. Not super great at the nurturing part of it. So I'm going to ignore that and just keep going over here. Okay, so a little bit about us. Okay.
Maybe.
Promise you that worked during the tech check. Let's see if we can. How close do I have to get, Kayla, for this to work? So you just speak, and I'll just run the slides from the back.
Okay, sounds great. So we were foster parents for 10 years. We have adopted 4 of our 6 kids through the foster care system in the state of Texas. As we got into foster care, we really had no idea what we were doing. We jumped in. We had no children when we began fostering. There we are.
I fixed it.
About 5 years ago, we decided to become TBRI practitioners so that we could understand a little bit more and know a little bit more about what we were doing, give us a little bit more credibility as we were teaching families. But we've been doing this for much longer than that. We've been teaching and training families across the country for a long time.
So we do training for parents, churches, schools. That's the most exciting part, churches and schools, because parents want to hear. And surprisingly enough, churches and schools kind of don't. But if you want more about that, see me afterwards, and I'll tell you what was behind that comment. We do a lot of things. We have training, we have coaches across the country, and we have our Empowered Parent podcast, which is one of the most fun things we do with our friend Chris Turner. And we have 6 children, all of whom you're going to briefly meet here.
So these are our kiddos, just so everybody can kind of know. As we'll give some examples. We always try and de-identify stories because our kids' stories are their own, and we don't want to share that with you personally. But as we talk, we'll talk about some things that some of our kids have done and some ways that we've used nurturing care to kind of help them.
By de-identify, Kayla means she'll say, so you remember the tall blonde kid standing next to Ryan?
No, I won't do that.
Kidding.
So these are our kiddos, 4 of our kiddos we adopted. Then we have 2 biological daughters in the mix. So we brought them home at various ages between straight from the hospital to our last adoption. Our son was 6.5 when we adopted him. So we have an open adoption with one of our kiddos. And by open, I mean her birth mom and her little sister lived with us for 9 months. So it's a very open relationship. Her little sister actually went on vacation with us this summer. So that has been a fun and exciting adventure. as we have explored that. We've had that relationship for a long time. So our kids range in age. Our oldest will be 19 next month, and our youngest just turned 9 last week. So that's a little bit about our family.
A bit about our family. So I understand that having to be here for an 8:30 a.m. start is stressful. For me, I don't know if it was for you. The iron in our hotel room wasn't working this morning. So I'm like, can you set up an iron that works? Because I brought one shirt that needed to be pressed. And she said, didn't you bring a backup shirt? I said, a backup shirt that would need to be ironed as well? No, I did not bring one of those. But here we are. So let's do a little breathing exercise together, right? Because we know that breathing can be regulating. And so just follow the prompts on the screen. Okay, now we would do that for much longer, a whole minute, but since Elizabeth Wiebe is going to come in here and give me a dirty look if we go 1 second past 9:30, we're going to move on from breathing. Now, breathing's important because it could help regulate, right? And it's the exhaling that's really important because that is the brake pedal on your nervous system. So one of the things that we would recommend that families do is outside of the moment, coach your kids in having some breathing skills because it's a great time of bonding and they will eventually learn. And now our 13-year-old, when she's stressed, you can see her go, which helps. All right.
All right, so let's do a little definition of instrumental versus nurturing care. So when I first heard about instrumental care, I was like, well, that sounds like clinical. That sounds, I don't know, what is that? Instrumental care really is just meeting our kids' basic needs, meeting their needs their needs for food, their needs for sleep, their needs for having the supplies they need to go to school, clothing, all of those kinds of things. Those are instrumental needs, and typically parents are really good at that. Even in stressful situations, we make sure our kids eat, we make sure our kids go to bed, we make sure they get to school, all of those things. Those come kind of naturally to most people. It's when things get really hard that the nurturing care part of it kind of falls to the side. I will meet your basic needs, but I don't have the emotional capacity to meet your emotional needs right now. Anybody ever been in a stressful situation with your kids and thought, if we can just get to bedtime, then everything will be okay? And so what happens is in stressful situations, when we have kids who are struggling in relationship, we put nurturing care to the side and we end up just meeting those basic needs. We said we were foster parents for 10 years, and we find this very often with foster parents who are like, this kid's not gonna be with me for very long, so I'm gonna make sure they have the best specialist, I'm gonna advocate for them at school, I'm gonna get the right thing for them. They do all these things, but they don't play with their kids. They don't snuggle with their kids. They don't come up beside them. So think about if a kid comes home from school and they're sick. If a kid comes home from school and they're sick, what are their instrumental needs? We're going to give them maybe some soup. We're going to give them some medicine to help their fever go down, or we're going to give them healthy foods to help them get better. We're going to take them to the doctor, right? Those are their instrumental needs that they have. But what else as parents do we do when our kids are sick? If you're meeting their nurturing needs, if you're nurturing your kids, then you're also maybe going to tuck them in with their favorite blanket. You're going to let them watch their favorite TV show, and you're going to sit beside them, and you're going to stroke their hair and say, I'm so sorry you're not feeling so good, right? But if we're not in a good place and we're only able to meet those instrumental needs, the nurturing goes to the side, and we think, it's okay. We're doing the best we can, right? And that is okay. Sometimes we are doing the best that we can, but our kids need more than just those instrumental needs being met. Our kids need that nurturing care that comes from that tender look and that I'm so sorry and that wrapping your arms around them and snuggling with them and pulling them close when they're not feeling good, or just that leaning into them emotionally. Our kids need that from us as well.
Okay, so we will give examples of ourselves. So where's all my married people? Just raise my hand if you're married. Okay. How many of you, 2 minutes after having an argument with your spouse, where you just cannot believe that you're married to the most unreasonable person in the world, who won't listen to you, and you cannot believe that logic and common sense don't register? Anybody ever been there? Okay, I just do thank you, one hand and one yes at the front. I'll just assume the rest of you didn't hear my question. So, right 2 minutes after that argument, and you're still fuming, how many of you want to go to your spouse and say, hey, can I make you a sandwich or get you something to drink? How many of you want to do that? No, you don't, nobody wants to do that, right? And that's why nurturing care is so important to focus on it. It's so important to be proactive about it. It's so important to have it be a rhythm of your family, because you know that there's every single day with your kids, there comes a moment where you are just, that's my best this morning, right? And you're so frustrated, and you may go to your room and slam your door, and you just want to check out. That's when you need to lean into the nurture. But nurture is it's hardest when the relationship is struggling, right? That's why we want to proactively do these things. And we're going to talk about nurture groups in the second half today. And you got supplies on your tables to engage in one. That's why we asked you to sit next to another person, because you're going to have to interact with another human being to do this. So we have this be part of the rhythm of the family, have this be part of what you do, because it's in these times that you can go to something that everybody's kind of used to, because it's part of what you do at home, and use that as a way to reconnect and provide some nurture for the families. Okay. Everybody say, "Oh." Thank you for doing exactly what I said. Okay, so kids need nurture and structure. But one of my favorite ways to explain this is because nurture lets somebody know they're loved. Structure lets somebody know they're safe, right? There's a fair amount of safety for those of you who are flying home, knowing that all the bags and all the humans were scanned before they got on the airplane with you, yeah? Right? So you're able to do that because you feel safe on the airplane. Well, nurture, structure, those rules help people feel safe. That's why you cannot have a home environment without any rules. And we'll look at that on a slide here in just a second. Nurture helps people feel loved. It's why they need both, right? Structure makes you feel safe, nurture makes you feel loved. That's why you have to have both. But we don't play good cop, bad cop at home for you married folks out there. There isn't mom's nurture, dad's structure. If you were raised in this home, please finish the sentence for me. Just wait until your father gets home. Okay, that's the house I was raised in. And I don't know why, because my mother was so much meaner than my father. I tell my kids all the time, your grandparents did not raise me. Can I get a witness from somebody else here?
The great thing about nurture groups, though, is that for those of you that really like structure, it's a great way to build in nurture on a rhythm and a schedule and say, now obviously we want it to become a natural part of what you're doing. We want nurture to just be something that becomes natural. But as you're especially having really hard times with kids, so you've got kids with big behaviors. Anybody have kids with big behaviors? It's just at our house?
Just
okay.
two people.
When we have kids with big behaviors, when we have struggling in relationship, like we said, the nurture tends to fall by the wayside. And so when we add in nurture groups to our family rhythm, and we say we're going to do nurture groups at a regular time, every day, every week, whatever it is for your family. Families always ask me, well, how often should we do nurture groups? And I'm like, how bad are you struggling? If your family is in a really hard place, then every day I would do a nurture group, because you're probably finding that it's hard to get that nurture in a natural way when you're correcting behaviors. So just make it become a part of your everyday rhythm. If your family's in a pretty good place, but you have those occasional bumps in the road, then maybe every week you're doing a nurture group. Maybe you have one night a week and this is nurture group night, and it's like a fun thing, it's a family. Maybe you have a regular family check-in or something that you do with your family, or family meeting or something. Add it into the rhythm of that. If you're like, you know what, we're actually doing great, we haven't had any bumps in the roads for a while, maybe you just make it an occasional as-needed kind of thing. You have your supplies, you're ready when you need to, your kids are familiar with it, but it's not something that you do all of the time. So it fits in to your schedule and your needs for your family.
Now, if you forget all the things we just said, and you need to remember that kids need nurture and structure. Now, I guess again, unless there's an underlying medical condition, but if there's a baby who is what would we say, fussy, who's crying, and you've checked all the list. They don't need a diaper. They don't need something to eat. They don't need human interaction. They're not, and all of those things, right? What do? You swaddle them. Okay, and so what happens typically when you swaddle a baby? They tend to settle pretty quickly and go to sleep because the wrapping in that little blanket makes them feel safe and loved at the same time, right? The structure of the blanket helps the baby feel safe, but it's also very calming to them because I felt like they're being hugged. And so that is, to me, is like the easiest example to remember that human beings need nurture and structure to thrive, is the baby in the blankets. Okay. Just going to talk about the slide. Who's ever heard about the parenting styles thing before? Okay, so we will go through it pretty quickly over there. For those of you who love math, we'll use some math terms. On the x-axis, we have nurture. On the y-axis, we have structure. So we'll start over there on the top left corner with authoritarian. This is the my way or the highway parent. This is the I brought you into the world. You know this person, right? We could play this game all day because half of you probably raised by this person. Okay, this person values rules over relationship. If you've been around the church any amount of time, you've heard that kind of phrasing as well. And so this person, high structure, low nurture, great at meeting your instrumental needs, really bad at meeting your nurturing needs. And then in the bottom left there we have neglectful, which is as bad as it sounds, right? This parent, they have low nurture, low structure. They don't need dinner at the same time every night. They have a real laissez-faire, whatever kind of attitude to things. And if you've been around a trauma for more than 5 minutes, you know the predictability and structure are really important to people with trauma histories. And so this is an environment that some of our kids are potentially coming from, and it's not an environment in which they're going to thrive. So if you're like, hey man, we got like free range, laissez-faire parenting at the house, we'll have support group at that table afterwards. Then in the bottom right, there's permissive, low structure, but high nurture. This is very appealing and really, really popular and growing. This is the parent who wants to be their child's friend. Okay, that's problematic. That's problematic. God did not give you kids so you could be their homie. God gave you kids so that you could mentor them and raise them. Okay, if you want to be your child's friend when they're 25, that's awesome, but not when they're 15. And if you've ever worked with families where this is the prevalent way that the kids are parented, it is like bang your head against the wall, frustrating, trying to reach those parents. What we're talking about here is this authoritative. And again, for the math people, that is in the positive quadrant of this graph over here, because it is the most positive way to parent children, right? High structure, high nurture, right? I'm able to have boundaries, which is a sign of a good relationship. I'm able to have boundaries, but I'm able to provide care as well. And this, again, like I said, isn't good cop, bad cop. This isn't one parent is the one, the other parent's the other. You yourself have to be able to do both of these things in and of yourself. And if you're really great at structure, but nurture is not your thing, you stay great at structure and you get better at nurture. Right? You don't get into balance by making your strength, by weakening your strength. You get into balance by strengthening your weakness. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, awesome.
So where are we going to start, right? We're going to start with making sure that we understand some of the basic things that our kids need. So what a nurture group is a way to take nurture and wrap teaching a skill inside a nurturing environment. So that's why it's usually appealing to families, is because they're like, wait, I can teach my kids something while giving them nurture? Yes, please. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wrap that skill building inside a nurturing environment. And so one of the things that we have to look at and we have to start with is, what are some of the things that our kids need work on? What are some of the things, the skills that need building in our children that we can start with inside a nurture group? And the biggest thing that the thing we're gonna focus in on, and I'll give you some other ideas of other things, is attachment. Many of you have kids who've come to you with a disorganized style of attachment. And if you're not familiar with attachment styles, I would highly recommend looking at the book, The Power of Showing Up. It gives a really good, simple explanation of attachment and how it's formed in a healthy, loving way. And then we all know that our kids that have come to us that have experienced trauma, it wasn't the way it was formed for them. And it gives some ideas on things, how to build on that relationship. So we're going to look at attachment skills because the thing that we know is that behavior is communication of a need. And oftentimes that need is relationship. Oftentimes the need that our kids are expressing is that they need to know that we can be trusted. They need to know that we have their best interest at heart. And without that attachment, without that healthy, secure attachment, they don't trust us. They don't think that we can give them what they need, so they will seek it out for themselves. They will try to do for themselves. They will take control of every situation.
How many?
Go ahead.
Yeah. How many of you have heard of Jude Cassidy before? Okay, Jude Cassidy is possibly the preeminent attachment researcher in the world, and has done a lot of things. If I remember correctly, she works at Stanford University. And if you just Google Jude Cassidy scholarly articles, there's like 490 of them, okay? And so she came up with these hallmarks of secure attachment. And for those of you who say, well, that sounds clinical and like a bad movie that I might watch at Christmas time, what we like to call them is the indicators of a healthy relationship. And so Jude Cassidy would say, if these 4 things are present, then we're heading in the right direction relationally with other human beings. Now, these don't only hold in the parent-child relationship. These hold in any relationship you would have in your life, whether that be with a spouse, whether that be with a parent, whether that be with friends, okay? So we're just going to talk briefly about these 4 points, and then as we go through the nurture group stuff, we'll give you some more examples of these. So please remember what we're looking at over here. So the first 2 I'm going to talk about, I'm going to combo them, because they're all sort of 2 sides of the same coin. And so the first one is to seek and receive care. Now, how many of you have children when they're hurt, run and hide rather than seek you out? Okay, that's pretty common, right? And the reason that they run and hide instead of seeking you out is because they don't trust that you're going to help them. And the reason they don't trust that you're going to help them because none of the adults in their life before you helped them. Okay? And so that's broken. And we have to realize that we have to be with our kids in their brokenness and help them, okay? So they don't seek your care. And then if they seek your care, they might be really reluctant for you to help them when they come to you, okay? But let's rejoice that they made the progress that they're coming to you to seek your care. Then the second one of there is to give care. They typically don't help very much. You'll notice if some of the other kids get hurt, they might look at, are you okay? Bring them an ice pack or any of those kinds of things, right? Because their ability to give care is really, really compromised because their ability to live in relationship with other human beings has been compromised by their history. So here's a quick example. If you're riding down the road and you notice that there is somebody on the side of the road who is trying to change a flat tire on their car. If you're like most people in Dallas-Fort Worth, you just make sure you're doing 85 when you go by. Anybody from Dallas-Fort Worth?
Don't make eye
here?
contact.
You know what I'm saying. I'm not lying. You just go right by. Sometimes you're even nice enough to change lanes. But because you don't know that person, you don't know what's waiting there. You're really reluctant to stop and help them. It might be a setup. Robbers on your way to Jericho might jump out from behind the tree and beat you and take your things, right? We think in these terms because you don't know that person. You don't know what you're in. So you're reluctant to stop and give care to them. At the same time, if you're the person on the side of the road, okay, since Allison, may I pick on you? Okay. So if Allison's on the side of the road and it's dark and a car pulls behind her, and she can't tell who it is because there's only the bright headlights, you immediately will become hypervigilant. You'll feel the tension in your body. You'll have a heightened sense of awareness about everything that's going on you because you don't know what's coming. And if the voice that you can't see comes from beyond this light and says, do you need help? And you don't recognize the voice, you're going to say, no, I'm fine. I've called. Help's on the way. They should be here soon. But if you recognize the voice, and it's me, and I say, Allison, do you need help? You'll say, oh my gosh, yes, please, Ryan. I'm so glad you stopped. I was just so frustrated that everybody just went by at 85 and wondering, like, don't we help our neighbors anymore? Do you see the difference? Because you know me, right? You're able to receive the care from me, but because you don't know me, you don't trust how I'm going to care for you. you push me away. And so that's why it's important that we realize where we are, and we have some markers that we want to move to with our children. And the things that we're going to talk about after the slide are really going to help us get there.
The next one is dependence and independence, often autonomy, right? We want our kids to get to a place of autonomy. We want them to be able to be independent. The problem is oftentimes when our kids come to us at an older age, we push them to independence before we help them rely on us and become dependent. It's super important that our kids are first dependent on a healthy caregiver before they can be independent in the world. So if they don't learn to trust us, they don't learn how to be dependent on us, they won't be able to go out into the world. Now, something you may or may not have heard is that our kids who've experienced trauma are about half their chronological age. So when we have a kid that comes to us and they're 6, we expect them to do 6-year-old things. We're like, you should be able to tie your shoes, or you're at least learning and trying to tie your shoes. You're able to get yourself dressed, and you're able to feed yourself. The problem is they may emotionally be about 3, and if they're living in that state of constant fear, they're in that emotional part of themselves, and they're more like a 3-year-old. And when I tell parents that, they're like, yes, they do act like a 2 or 3-year-old all the time. And I'm like, that's where you need to meet them. You need to meet them at that 2 or 3-year-old. It doesn't mean you treat them like a 2 or 3-year-old, like, well, you're acting like a 2-year-old, so I'm going to treat you like a 2-year-old. We're not doing it punitively.
Yeah, that's not the advice. Don't go home and do that.
We're not doing it punitively, but what we're doing is we're saying, I'm going to meet them where they are, and I'm going to help them become dependent, and I'm going to help them learn to trust me, and then I can help them become independent. And it's really hard if you bring home a teenager because you're like, oh my gosh, I only have 2 more years, and this kid's going to be out on their own. I have to teach them these things. You can teach them those things while still allowing them to be dependent on you and helping them learn to trust you in the process. And the last one is negotiate needs. And negotiate needs, that just means that I can tell you when I don't like something that you're doing, and you will listen to me. And we can maybe, have you heard of a compromise? I'm sure you guys have done compromises. That's one of my favorite tools to use with kids to help them learn to negotiate their needs. Of course, when they learn how to use compromises, the really hard part is they want to compromise about everything. And that's okay though, because we're building this sense of healthy attachment, right? Where they now trust that when they ask me for something, I'm going to listen. It doesn't mean I always say yes. It means that I'm going to listen. So as we move into nurture groups, what we want to do is we want to say, what skills here is my child lacking? What do they need in this realm that I can begin using in a nurture group to teach them?
I just want to add one thing because we're about to start doing some nurture groups at the table. If you're currently not comfortable interacting with humans like that, I mean, the most you're going to have to do is maybe put a Band-Aid on somebody, but we'll explain all of that. I just want to say about the dependence and independence. If we ask parents, how would you define success as a parent? This is some version of this answer. I will deem my parenting successful if I have raised a healthy, well-adjusted, independent, contributing member of society who loves the Lord. Christian parents give that. Like, I'll ask 1,000 Christian parents, and it'll be some version of that 1,000 times. You're never going to get there to the independent person if you don't first have that child understand they can be completely dependent on you. That's development, right? Kids are other regulated, co-regulated, so they can be self-regulated. Somebody meets their needs, helps them with their needs so that they can meet their own needs, right? It tracks through child development, it tracks through attachment. This idea that if you want to raise an independent person, they first have to be completely dependent on you.
So think through the skills that your child needs. What is it that they need from you to get to that place of healthy independence, healthy attachment, right? As we look through those 4 things. And that's where we're going to start for nurture groups. So think that in your head, put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it when we get to the skill building part of nurture groups.
Well, I just want to tell you and everybody watching at home that you hit your marker. Okay,
job.
we had to be at this slide by 9 o'clock, so good job, everybody.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to gather our supplies, okay? So at our house, what we do is we actually have a little basket, and in that basket, we keep all the things that we need for a nurture group, because let's just be honest, if I have to go around the house gathering all the things that I need, I'm never going to have a nurture group. It's just not going to happen. So we have a little basket that we keep in a place in our room so that we can pull it out and say, hey, we're going to do a nurture group, and everything we need is right there. So I'm going to show you guys some. For those of you that are watching us virtually, I hope you can see these. We are at the end going to have a QR code you can scan, and you can get a list of all the supplies that we use. So don't feel like you have to frantically write down all the things we're going to say.
List of supplies, and then the
And
rules,
kind of
and
instructions
then
and
instructions
stuff.
and how to,
Yeah.
you can download there. I do want to say, just if I may, just before you show all of these, the first item here we have is weighted items, whether that would be like a weighted lap pad or those neck wraps that kind of pull down. We did not bring those with because the TSA is not amused by flying with weighted items because every single time we've tried it, we have to open our bags because it looks like shrapnel on the x-ray screen, and so we have to explain the weighted items. So we now do not, because I think you flew with them in your bag one time,
Yeah.
and they must have flagged her in the system because the next 10 times they pulled her aside and went through her bag and like wandered her and everything. So we don't have weighted items to show you, but you guys are all familiar with like lap pads and the weighted neck stuff? Okay.
Yeah, so we always keep, and we keep these, we have them all over our house. We have weighted stuffed animals, we have weighted lap pads, all those kinds of things. Those can be very calming for kids, and in a nurture group setting, because remember, some of our kids don't want nurture. They're pushing us away when we try and give them nurture.
Well, we have an example.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of weighted.
It's got a little bit of weight. It's not super heavy, but for little kids, and they smell like lavender.
Yeah, if y'all haven't seen these out at the vendor table, they're adorable. But having those kinds of items just in your basket of things that you have with you, so that if your kids begin to get dysregulated inside the nurture group, you can hand those over. Some other things that we have. So on your tables, for those of you that are here live with us, you have suckers and gum. These are also very regulating things, and I know you're thinking, I'm going to give my kids sugar, and typically I don't use Dum-Dums usually. I have like more natural ones because I have kids that have struggle with food dye and have really bad reactions to it. So, but giving them something to suck on, something to chew, to kind of help regulate. Plus, it's like they're like, ooh, nurture groups, I get gum and suckers, right? Like they want to do it. It's novel, it's fun. And so we have our kids, they know that it's in the kit, and immediately when we sit down to do nurture group, they're like, may I have a piece of gum? And it's a great way to give them a yes, because I'm always going to tell them yes. Right? So it's a great way for them to have
I just want to say something about the gum over here. Please don't get your sugar-free xylitol as a sweetener, little chiclet thing. That's not going to be regulating. It needs to be something big and heavy.
Hard as a rock.
So they have to really, really work to chew it. It gives them a lot of proprioceptive input, which is very, very soothing. And I promise you that if you eat like, free-range, vegan, organic, everything at home, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine, I promise. Like, we have suckers that are, like, colored with beet juice at home, which I think I actually have on the list, a link to get those on Amazon.
Another thing you're going to need for your kit is you're going to need some Band-Aids. Now, we'll give you some variations of things that you can do, but Band-Aids are super important. Band-Aids are a great way for us to give and receive care. They're a great way for our kids to ask us for care. And so it's going to be part of our nurture group is going to be Band-Aids. Now, as you go forward and you start doing these more and more, you may get more creative. You may choose something a little bit different to add to that portion of your nurture group. But Band-Aids are really cheap. You can go to the Dollar Tree and you can find all sorts of really cool, fun Band-Aids. So we just keep several boxes of Band-Aids in our nurture kit that are just kind of fun. Then some sort of a fidget. Again, we like to go for cheap things because we know they're going to like go missing. These pipe cleaners, and you've got some on your tables. These pipe cleaners are a great fidget. We need something for our kids' hands to do so they don't like drive us crazy as we're trying to explain things. We want them to have something for their hands to do. They can move them around. They can, bend them and make them into things. I was a classroom teacher for 11 years. I taught third graders. And I used to be the teacher that was like, oh my gosh, the kids need to stop drawing. They need to stop moving their hands. I wanted them to sit perfectly still because I thought that was how they were going to listen to me. And then I realized that in their movement, they were regulating themselves. And they were then actually able to listen to me. And God gave us several children that cannot sit still for the life of them. And I'm sure it was to teach me that lesson, because I will say to my one kid, I'll be like, what did I just say? Because she's like moving everywhere and doing all sorts of things. And she knows exactly what we were talking about. But her body was trying to regulate and she was moving around. So having some sort of fidgets, we just brought these. These are because they're cheap and easy, and they're really fun. The kids love them.
Yeah, so, we have self-regulating skills as an adult, but kids don't have self-regulating skills. So while Kelly was talking, I just looked around the room. Some people are playing with pipe cleaners. Some people are chewing gum. One person's doing the leg overlaid rock. Other person's bouncing their foot. Somebody was rolling their ankles, right? We all do these things because nobody wants to be sitting in a room listening to two people at 8:30 in the morning. Nobody wants to do it, right? And if you just got here late, you didn't even stop and get some of the coffee like I didn't. They have a nasty trick here. There's a bunch of coffee pots that the church uses, but they're not like CAFO full. And so I went there and just like, oh.
It's very sad.
Anyhow, but we all want to regulate and we want to cope. Some of you will doodle. Some people might kick their shoes off and all those kinds of things, right? And so we have to give those skills to our children. And you're thinking, well, it's really dumb that I have to teach my child. Okay. But I promise you, if you can give them the regulating skills, you're going to be less frustrated with them.
Okay, so some other things that you'll want to have in there is you'll want to have some sort of a snack for feeding. So we're going to do a feeding exercise. We won't do it in here today, but we're going to do a feeding exercise in our nurture group, and you're going to feed each other something. So these are two of my favorite things that we use. These are animal cookies. I like the ones that have little letters on them because we can actually do an activity where we, when you've got kids that are a little reluctant, like, why are you going to put that in my mouth? Can't I just give me a bag of them? I want to eat them, Maybe they're a little reluctant. You can make it into a game. So you can say, hey, I'm going to put this on your tongue, and I want you to try and figure out what letters on the cookie. And you can order these on Amazon, is where we got them. If you have an Aldi near you, they usually sell these at Aldi too. The other thing we like are these little gummies. These are the Fruit Burst gummies. The great thing about these is you can say, hey, I'm going to put this in your mouth. I want you to guess what flavor I'm putting in your mouth. And it just gives a way to be like, not just like, hey, I'm going to feed you, okay? And you feed them. Because feeding is nurturing. So this is what we end with. We end with a nurturing feeding activity. Let's see, some other things we got. Oh, another thing I like to have, we don't always have these, is a magic feather. You've seen the movie Dumbo before, and Dumbo has the magic feather. Basically what you need is something for when we're sharing things in the group, we pass it around, and this is whoever has the magic feather gets to talk. And so that way if we're sharing something during the teaching time or whatever, or if mom or dad are talking, then you hold up and you're like, if I have the magic feather, that means I get to talk. Obviously, if you've got teenagers, they're probably going to look at you like, you're crazy.
Your little blue bag's like Mary Poppins' purse. It's like no end.
It's like no end.
Here's an example of the suckers. You can buy them. They're called Yum Earth, and they're organic, no food dyes. So I know if you have any kids that struggle with that, we have one that if you give her anything with the red food dye, it gets like biblical at the house, if you know what I'm saying. And so we had to find these. You can buy these on Amazon, pretty readily available.
Okay, a few other things. A lot of times at the beginning of our nurture group, we're going to do a check-in. So we're going to see how's everybody doing. One of the things we like to do is, if you've never seen these engine plates, the great thing about engine plates is it gives us an idea of where are our kids? Are they dysregulated right now? So that obviously we want them to be in the green. Well, actually, we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to this part of the nurture group. But we're gathering our supplies. Another thing for regulation, these little windmill things, or pinwheels, not windmills, pinwheels are great. That breathing exercise we did at the beginning, if you have a child that gets very dysregulated, you can give this to them and ask them to keep the pinwheel moving. We usually keep 2 of them, and that way we can blow on one and they can blow on another, because then they can watch us and we can go back and forth. Another thing that we like to do, one of the big things that we do in teaching, in the skill teaching part of the nurture group, is we talk about feelings. Our kids tend to have a very shallow emotional vocabulary, and sometimes so do we. And so we have to practice our feelings words, because I hate you, you're the worst mom in the whole world, is not actually what they're feeling. What they're feeling is, I'm really disappointed that you didn't let me have that candy before dinner. I'm really frustrated that my sister took my favorite toy. I'm really fill in the blank with what emotion they're feeling, right? But what comes out is, I hate you, I'm never going to talk to you ever again, right?
So
That's what they say.
So we'll talk about feelings in just a minute, but let me just run the
Yeah.
So you can buy these dice at the Dollar Tree, and you just write in them with dry erase markers. And so we've written some feelings phrases on them. We have these feelings flashcards. You can get these on Amazon if you've not seen these. And then also the Kimochi.
Y'all seen these? These are really cute. They have like a face on them, and then on the back they have the feeling that goes with it. And so you can just like pull them. We have a whole bag of them. You can just like pull one out, and then in the teaching time, we'll show you what we do with those. All right, so we start off in the nurture group. We're going to do we're going to go over our rules. If you're familiar with TheraPlay, most of these come from TheraPlay. No hurts, stick together, have fun, and then we add grown-ups are in charge. That way when they go, well, but I want to, you go, oh, remember, grown-ups are in charge. It gives us a little script to go back to when things start to get off track. So we want to start with that to begin with.
And you can have that exact slide you can download and print and stick on the fridge or whatever, and the link that we'll show to you a little bit later. What?
And if you're thinking like, I have teenagers, they're going to be like, this is really ridiculous. When the rules part of it, I did a teen group with adopted teens, and we had about 16 adopted teens in the group, and we did nurture groups with them. And one of the things that we did was we actually had them come up with the rules that would help them feel safe while we were doing it. So that's a way you can modify that. So, okay, so we promised you a little bit of an experience of a nurture group, right? So sorts of things. My favorite thing to do and kind of my go-to is highs and lows. So everybody goes around and shares what's their best thing, worst thing for the day, for the week. So if you're doing them every day, it's for the day. What was the best thing, worst thing? Now my kids always say, Mom, we have to start with worst thing because we don't want to go around with the worst thing being last. We want to end on a high. So I always say highs and lows, but really it should be lows and highs. So those of you that are at home joining us, if you've got somebody with you, everybody's going to turn to somebody near them and say, tell them your highs and lows for the day or for this week. So for the conference, maybe you say, what's the best thing and the worst thing about the conference? So we're going to give you really quick at your tables. Just
like 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. High, low. Go ahead.
All right, how many of you said the high of your CAFO experience was coming here this morning?
Oh, we had a prize for you if you said that.
Oh my gosh,
Sorry,
I guess I'll just keep the $50 Amazon gift card then.
Okay, so the next thing after you do your check-in, so you review your rules, you do your check-in, then you come to your nurture. So your first point of nurture is what I was talking about earlier with your Band-Aids. You can do other things, so if your kids don't like Band-Aids, the great thing about Band-Aids is we can talk, basically what you do is you say, do you have a hurt that I can put a Band-Aid on? And initially, they're going to find the bug bite on their ankle. They're going to find the little scratch they got. They're going to find little things. And then they might go, well, actually, my stomach is kind of hurting. And you're thinking, well, you can't put a Band-Aid on a stomach ache. But you can. You just symbolically put it on there. I'm so sorry. You're giving that nurturing care in a symbolic way. And then what's going to start coming out is they're going to say, my friend said something really unkind to me at school today, and it hurt my feelings. And then we're going to symbolically put a Band-Aid on their heart to say, that really hurt your heart. That really hurt your feelings today. So that's ultimately where we're working up towards. But this is giving and receiving care.
So we do a camp in Colorado in August for adoptive and foster families, and one of the things we gift everybody with on the first day is a nurture kit for their family, and talk them through how to do nurture kits the week they're there. And I love seeing the adults walk around by Wednesday because they had a headache or because something hurt their feelings. It's so cool. And so don't say, well, this is just for the kids, because it's not Parents Lead Kids nurture group. It's a family nurture group, and we all have to be involved. And here's one of the ways. Remember we talked about this hallmarks of secure attachment: give, seek and receive care, give care. At our house, we have a rule. And we didn't sit down and say, guys, we're going to work towards having healthy attachments in the home, and here are the steps. Okay. But what we did was we said, okay, if you need a Band-Aid, you need to ask somebody to put it on for you, including Kayla and I. We don't put Band-Aids on ourselves. We'll go to the kids and say, hey, I cut my finger. Will you put a Band-Aid on for me, please? And then they put it on. And so you may think, that's really silly. But please remember, for those of you who have kids who play soccer, while they dribble around orange cones at practice, there are no orange cones on the field on Saturday. Yet they're amazingly able to play the game, you see, right? Because we practice outside of the moment, we develop the skill. And now in my home, my children are used to run and hide. When somebody's maybe running in the house, I don't know, at your house, my house, kids run through the house, and they'll maybe slip and fall. One of their siblings will show up at the scene of the accident with an ice pack for them. And I never had to tell anybody, hey, if your sibling's hurt, go get an ice pack, because we've modeled it with something as non-threatening as a Band-Aid. And over time, they've developed the skill, and now they're able to take care of each other and ask for help, just because we use Band-Aids for a long, long time.
So this is just one way of giving nurture. There are tons of other ways. You could probably think of other ways, but I always say start simple. Have in there Band-Aids. If something else comes to you, if you're like, oh, we could really do this, we've used temporary tattoos as a way, because it's that safe touch, right? So think of what will be effective for your kids. If your kids don't like sticky stuff, then take like the bandages that stick to themselves and wrap that around their arm or wrap that around their foot or whatever it is to give that symbolic care. Okay, the next thing is fun with teaching. So this is where we're going to do that skill building part of it. Obviously, the Band-Aids are building some of those skills already, but we're also going to add in some other ways that we can teach our kids a skill. So we showed you some of these tools that we have for feelings, right? One of the things we like to do is we like to just add in some kind of an activity where we practice our feelings as part of the teaching, because it's something that's big at our house is we need to work on feelings. So this little dice says on here, it says, I feel sad when, I feel angry when, I feel embarrassed when, I feel happy. You can put whatever you want on here. You can also find tons of other ways to do this, right? Those flashcards. But what we're practicing is for our kids that struggle, we're modeling for them. So I sometimes feel embarrassed when somebody asks me to, and we fill in the blank with what it is that makes us feel embarrassed. And then all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and the kids go, yeah, I feel really embarrassed when my teacher makes me stand up and give a presentation. I feel like all my classmates are looking at me. And so all of a sudden they now have a word to go with that feeling that they had. And so we can practice that in the teaching skills. There's some other ways we can do that with teenagers. We have done, not feelings, but we've done silly string, where everybody gets a thing of silly string. And I know it sounds crazy. We only did it after we had we'd done nurture groups for a long time, and then we went outside with silly string. Silly string has this amazing ability to teach skills. I don't know if you knew this or not, but if you give every kid a can of silly string and you say, you may only shoot someone with permission. Now, all of a sudden, we're working on the skill of asking permission because they want to shoot somebody with that silly. And self-control. Yeah, and so they're like walking up to people going, can I spray you with my silly string? And of course the kids think it's hilarious, so they're like, yes. And so they get a yes. So we're building this skill, and they love it. Now, I did do this with this group of teenagers, and I had this one kid, and he held the silly string in his hand, and he stood there, and he was looking around, and he wouldn't ask for help. He wouldn't ask anybody because he was afraid he was going to get a no. He was afraid they weren't going to say yes, so he wouldn't ask. So I came up to him and I said, if you ask me, I'll say yes. And he goes, can I spray you? I said, yes. And then all of a sudden he felt like, oh, everybody's not going to say no. And it taught him this great skill of I can use my voice to ask permission. So kids love it. And there's so many ways. You can be so creative with this.
That's ironically how our proposal went as well. Kayla said, if you ask me, I'll say yes.
Oh my goodness
We don't have
gracious.
time to get into it.
No, we don't. Okay, role play is another thing that you can do. So if you have a scenario in your house that maybe is happening a lot, you can use some sort of role play to work it out. Maybe you've got sibling conflict or sibling rivalry. We always say start with attachment skills. Attachment skills are where you want to start, but then you go to those other things that are on the outside that are really you're struggling with. And you can do role play. Another game is right way, wrong way. Anybody heard of right way, wrong way? Okay.
Should be called wrong way, right way.
It should be called wrong way. It's kind of like the highs and lows. I always say it backwards, but we do it the opposite way. So here's what you do. It's kind of a role play way. So you say, okay, we're going to practice the wrong way to respond when I ask you to go clean your room. So you say, what's the wrong way? I'm going to ask you. And so then I come up to my kid and I say, you need to go clean your room right now. It is such a trash pit. And I tell them, like, I do it the wrong way also. And then they say, I'm never going to clean my room. It's horrible when you make me clean my room. And they love it. They eat it up because you've asked them to do it the wrong way because they know what the wrong way is because it's the way they respond most of the time. And so then you say, yay, good job doing it the wrong way. And then you say, let's do it the right way this time. And then I come up to them and I say, I need you to go clean your room, please. It's been a while since you picked up the laundry. Can you go do that for me now? And they say, I'm playing this video game. I really want to play this game. Do you think I could have 5 more minutes to play my video game and then I'll go pick up the laundry? And I say, absolutely. That sounds like a great compromise. That's the right way. And then we say, yay, it's the right way. Now, sometimes our kids don't know what the right way is. They know what the wrong way is, but sometimes they don't know what the right way is, and we have to show them. We have to say, I'm going to ask you to go clean up your room, and you're going to say, hey, I need 5 more minutes to play this video game. Or, can I do it after I brush my teeth? Or, you're going to give them, what is it you want them to do? How do you want them to respond? So in that teaching, because remember, we've done a bunch of fun nurture. Now we're going to do some teaching, but also in play and fun.
And then just one more thing I want to add about role play. You could use puppet play there as well. We have some hand puppets and stuff. So if your kids feel real kind of shame and they want to connect about it, it is a little bit of a disassociative experience, but in a positive way that they can almost use the puppet as their proxy rather than themselves. So depending on with your kids' needs, we've used the puppet play as well to great effect.
Okay, so this engine plate. If you've not seen these before, basically what the engine plate is it's a way to check in on where your kid is. So you can use it in 2 ways in the nurture group. You can use it at the beginning of the nurture group to see where people are, see where your family is. How am I feeling? Am I feeling a little jittery, can't sit still, kind of my engine's running high? Or am I feeling kind of sluggish and low? Or I'm feeling okay right now. We can check in. We actually have a giant one that we made out of like foam board, and you can just write everybody's name on a little, like a little clothespin, and then you don't have to have individual ones for them. Or I know people that will have individual ones that they'll put like on their fridge or just keep in the basket with a nurture group. But the beautiful thing about this is you can start to teach your kids how their engine's running. How are they feeling? And you might have to say, how do you feel right now? Do you feel like you can't sit still? Do you feel a little jittery? Is your heart pounding a little bit? And then we're going to do some things to calm them down. Maybe we're going to pull out our pinwheel and we're going to say, we're going to do some deep breathing right now because everybody seems to be in the red right now. Or maybe everybody's kind of lethargic, so we're going to get up and do some jumping jacks to get everybody going before we go. So we're teaching our kids to listen to their body and figure out what they're feeling, because sometimes they just don't know. If they start to sit down and pay attention, then they go, my brain is kind of racing. My heart is pounding really hard. And they start to pay attention to what their body's doing. That's when we can get those self-regulation skills.
Due to the presence of the coronavirus, COVID-19 virus, we're not going to do a lot of interactive stuff at the tables today, also because we have 5 minutes left.
So
we have 5 minutes
5 minutes,
left.
okay. Well, the next thing, this would be something that you could do, right? This would be an example of an activity. We're not going to do it since we're low on time, but this would be something that makes you feel frustrated, something that makes you feel excited. I like to use the dice because then it's not like, oh, Mom always makes us do, something that makes us feel frustrated. Now the dice just told us what we had to do.
And frustrated and excited are intentional because kids' vocabulary is usually happy or sad or mad, right? And so now we're giving words that are probably more accurate descriptions of what they're feeling inside.
Okay, then again, we said we're wrapping it in nurture, right? So we did nurture, we did a skill, now we're back to nurture again. This time is our feeding activity. You can get super creative with this. I showed you my 2 things that are my go-to, keep it in the basket ones, but you can do all sorts of things. We've done donuts on a stick, and we've put a stick through the middle of the donuts, and they had to bite it off the stick, and they had to take bites until it fell off the stick, right? The kids love those kinds of things. We do like the little powdered donuts. They think it's fun. You can do any kind of feeding activity. If you've got kids that don't want you to put your fingers close to their mouth, or maybe parents that don't want that, then you use Twizzlers because they're long and they don't get close to your mouth. Whatever makes them feel comfortable, and then working up to, because feeding is a nurturing activity. It is you make eye contact when you're feeding somebody, you're getting close to them, it's nurturing.
Hey, can you face me? Here's why don't start with hands by the face, because this is a significant trust activity. Because if I'm putting food in Kayla's mouth, she has to trust that I'm not going to hurt her, right? It's very vulnerable. While at the same time, I have to trust that she's not going to bite my fingers, right? It is a really, really great trust-based activity. And if the kids don't want to do that really early on, don't push it, because they've just told you that you don't have that kind of relationship with them yet. And so one of the things my wife, who I'll tell a short thing, is very creative. These are alphabet letters, and so when we do feeding at home, you don't just get to get your gummy. You have to put this in your mouth and then run your tongue over it and try to tell the person who fed you what letter it is. So that becomes a fun game. The kids love that. And then with the gummies, you have to guess the flavor of the gummy that you put. So you can expand it, and that makes the kids laugh a lot, because when they put a Q in your mouth, they know you're not going to get it. And when you say L, they just erupt in laughing because they can't believe how stupid you are. And that's fine.
But don't try it with actual animal crackers, because they're impossible to figure out what animal it is when you put it in your mouth. We tried it because I couldn't find the alphabet ones. Okay, then the last thing is your closing ritual. So for us, a lot of times we like to read a Bible story together, or we like to recite a verse we're working on, or maybe just pray. You can pray together, but something to kind of close it and end your time together. Another thing that we do is we pass a goodbye. And so we're going to let you guys try this at your table. Again, 30 seconds. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to say goodbye to the person next to you, and they're going to say goodbye in the same way that you said goodbye to them. So if you say, and don't say any words, then they're going to do that to you. And then they're going to turn to the person next to them, and they get to use their own goodbye. So let's say I look at Ryan and I say, goodbye. And he's going to look back at me and say,
Aloha.
No, you're supposed to repeat what I say.
Sorry.
Clearly, we didn't practice this
I
one.
wasn't listening.
I know.
In my defense.
So if I say goodbye.
Goodbye.
So he's going to repeat the way I did. But then he would turn to the next person and he would say it in his way.
Konnichiwa. That's hello. Arigato. I don't know.
Arigato.
Somebody speak Japanese. Oh my gosh, that was horrible.
Clearly, that's a bad example. We should have practiced that.
Can I have do a redo?
No, we don't have time. That's not how I would do it with my kids, but since we're out of time, we're not going to do that. But something to close out your time together, something to kind of end it in a way. My kids always want to go back and do more things. Can we do the feeding thing again? Can we do this again? But we can keep it simple. You can do a nurture group in as small as 15 minutes, depending on how big your family is. Or you can make it last longer. But we love them. I hope you will use them. We've got one last slide that will take you to a handout.
Okay, if you scan that QR code, it'll be a page. It'll have everything we talked about, some links to buy some of the things we talked about. There's printables of the rules of Nurture Group, and then just a one-pager on the steps of doing the Nurture Group. And then, obviously, those are all the ways that you can get a hold of us. I wanted to say one other thing. Don't go, yeah, that sounds great if you have little kids. I remember one time there was a family in crisis. They asked us to come over to their home. And part of our time in our home, we did a nurture group. And the kids were 17, 19, and 22, maybe they had the 22-year-old son was there with them as well, and they all participated. It is a great, great activity. And I will tell you that that was the first time we got involved in that family's life, and I had the great joy of about a year later at a water park. The dad walked up to me and he said, "Hey, I just need to tell you something. We're adopting our son on Tuesday." And the reason that they called us is because they were like, "This kid needs to get out of our home." And the genesis of it, and he said to me, "I promise you we would never have gotten here if it wasn't for your guys' help." And the genesis of that help was sitting on the floor feeding bubble gum to each other. Please do not look down on the value of this. It sounds so simple and you think it's too simple to work, but I promise you, sometimes the solution to complex developmental trauma is simple. Because it's called complex developmental trauma and we only chase complex solutions. But that's simply not true. This has been used to great effect in our home, great effect to people we've been working with for a long, long time now.
So the supplies you have on your table are yours to take. So if you want to take them and have a jump start on your nurture group, there's also a few extras on the tables around you.
Yes, so don't fight with the people at your table. Just go
Yeah.
to one of the other tables. Also, we have more
And I
if you
have
want.
more if you need more. So
Okay, and then
thank you guys.
CAFO2021.org
Oh, yes.
survey.
Survey.
Tell Elizabeth Weeby how much she loved us. Virtual people, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.